Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. It is December. Happy December. December 1st of 2020. Last month of 2020. This is it. No guarantee that 2021 is better, except, it's a pretty good bet. New president, normal person with a normal mouth. Anyway, I've been looking forward to that for a long time. Just looking forward to seeing less photographs of Donald Trump and not having to watch his weird mouth contortions. I don't know, oral contortions? That makes it sound like I'm talking about the way he speaks, which is also true, I guess. But, physically, I'm disturbed by his image, and I was hoping it would go away. Well, sooner than this. But, okay, holding on for 2021, just, 31 days left. 1 day for each flavor of ice cream available at Baskin-Robbins, presumably. They're still doing that, unless, of course, the pandemic hits them hard and they run low on supplies of certain of the flavors. I don't know what they can do to bring out, if there's a strategic national ice cream stockpile that I don't know about. This perhaps could be helpful. Something I wish I knew about before today. But anyway, all right, this is what we're facing in the upcoming days. Let's see, in the news in the last few days, available for discussion. And we'll cover some, but not all of it. The paperwork in the purported Mike Flynn pardon apparently, once again, you never know with these guys. It's apparently come through. People are sharing images of it. Did he sign it? There's something on the line there that purports to be Donald Trump's signature, yes. And it looks a lot like the sorts of things that he scribbles when we have witnessed him sign things. So it's entirely possible, but we don't know the provenance of it. And people are combing through it and trying to decide what it means. Empty Wheel, Marcy Wheeler, has decided that it's somehow no big deal. Not that it's no big deal that Mike Flynn gets pardoned, but that it's improperly designed, and I don't know, that perhaps in some way it won't, in fact, prevent Mike Flynn from eventually facing federal charges growing out of the Mueller investigation and elsewhere, but she's not telling how. So that's kind of disturbing. I mean, generally speaking, she delivers on these things. But, and I guess it seems like she might have actual reason not to discuss what the loopholes are that she thinks that she's found, as she says, until January 21st, the reason being, I suppose if you reveal those loopholes, that they are fixable before Trump leaves office. So, I don't know. That's the thing. That's the sort of thing that sets up very poorly in terms of delivering results, generally speaking, when others are making these promises. I don't know. I'm not really certain if I've tracked Marcy's track record on things like this, but I don't know. We can cross our fingers and hope, but it won't do you any good until January 21st anyway. Pardon me as I take a sip of the hot beverage that I'm hoping will help a little bit with the morning frog in throat. I have to dig up the information that I have. I know that one of you actually at some point sent, and the real problem is I can't remember how you sent it. Was it Twitter? Was it email? Was it a message on Daily Kos email internal system? I don't know. I'll have to look around, but somebody had some good suggestions about various products which I might find available online somewhere at giant stores that will enrich the guy who, as it happens, a side effect of it, enriching the ownership of the Washington Post. I think almost everything in the world that you would buy at this point probably does. Anyway, but I was just... Anyway, to to wrap up what I had from Marcy here, which is nothing, unfortunately, but there's promise of more to come. Trump attempts to invalidate the Mueller investigation is how she styles the the situation in her post on her blog and tweeting it around. This part is helpful in terms of framing the thing, that what he's doing here, trying to invalidate the Mueller investigation, as opposed to actually, targeting Mike Flynn for some specific help. He's helping Mike Flynn not because he cares about Mike Flynn, but because he cares about himself. I think that was obvious to everyone. But this is interesting too. She does add this one at the end. If I'm Judge Sullivan, I would schedule a hearing for January 21st, the day after Trump leaves office, to talk about the altered documents in this docket. And that is something that kind of hangs out there. A number of people have floated some theories about why the pardon is questionable, and floated some theories about perhaps ways of invalidating it. I don't know of any, federal jurisprudence on the invalidation of pardons, but not something I ever studied, and it might not exist. We've never run into it quite like this before, but I understand the theoretical thinking. But maybe if any of you know about an existing jurisprudence on actual invalidations or limitations even on federal presidential pardons, let me know. I'd be interested in reading that. Marcy gives us very few hints. None, really. But just teases the idea. Well, I'll mention to you. I'll read you what she does say in this very short post. Should take about 2 seconds. Should have just read that. Trump attempts to invalidate the Mueller investigation. Overnight, DOJ submitted the pardon language for Mike Flynn in his docket. It covers the false statements as charged under the criminal information filed in the docket, all possible offenses arising from the facts set forth in that, and the statement of offense, all offenses that might arise from the proceedings under that docket number, all offenses under the investigative authority of Robert Mueller, all charges identified under Mueller's authority, including anything identified by the grand juries in D.C. or Virginia. As she puts it here, it is a breathtaking attempt to invalidate the work of Robert Mueller and Flynn's subsequent lies to get out of his legal jeopardy. This kind of pardon might work for others, but it does not, in fact, go far enough. As she puts it, it would be child's play, and let's do it. It would be child's play to charge and convict Mike Flynn without violating the scope of this pardon, even if it were to stand as written. I'll explain how on January 21st. And, I don't know, does that deserve dramatic music? I guess it seems like a good follow-up for this. Let's see. In other news, Scott Atlas makes his exit from the national stage, and I hope also from the medical profession, but I don't think they're going to get around to that. I think that they ought to single him out for some additional scrutiny. I piggyback on the story which arose yesterday about the, I don't know, did we discuss, we may have made some basic mention of the TikTok nurse in, I don't know where, I think as it turns out it was in the Pacific Northwest somewhere. And we'll dig up the story so that we get all the details. But the nurse on TikTok who claimed to be an oncology nurse of all things, who was flaunting her disregard for COVID protocols, as some people, are wont to do on TikTok these days, and on every social media platform. But anyway, she went on and on about how she doesn't wear masks, et cetera, which is troubling enough all by itself. But when it is about an oncology nurse, dealing with very vulnerable and immune-compromised patients, it was particularly disturbing. And anyway, apparently her, her TikTok honeymoon coming to an end, and she's been suspended. I don't know if I put that story aside anywhere or not, but I did retweet it yesterday, and I think I did see it written up over on the front page of Daily Kos. But I was thinking, I'm glad they're done with her, or that they've picked up on the signal here, and they got her in the system. But yeah, so she's been suspended, and now do Scott Atlas. And I didn't even, I I don't think I even recognized, maybe it had happened, maybe it didn't, maybe that's why he was in mind, that he had left his government position. Apparently he's run out of time for eligibility for service in this weird niche that they cut out for him. Let me read Mark Sumner's more organized thoughts on this to get underway here. Scott Atlas shrugs all the way off. I like it. This morning, just now, in fact, at 9 a.m., up on the front page at Daily Kos, in what might be the most appropriate forum imaginable, Scott Atlas has resigned his spot at the head of Donald Trump's, quote, and it is in quotes here, coronavirus task force, with a post on Twitter. That's how he's out of here. I believe, really, that's a good signal to pick him up on murder charges. But hey, we might want to talk to charging attorneys on that one first. As might be expected, Atlas's exit letter contains a glowing amount, a large amount, I would say, of glowing self-praise for his brilliant handling of all things COVID-19, including a claim that he always worked from the, quote, latest science and evidence without any political consideration or influence. That he is delivering this auto tongue bath as hospitals and ICUs across the nation are full only makes it more perfect. And I had... Yes, I don't know whether I want to... well, yeah, I will. I'll divert from reading this just to make this other observation, which I was thinking about last night and this morning, with the new problem with the pandemic. And forget all the old problems. So the new problem with the pandemic is places reaching their hospital capacities in this latest surge. And, of course, it'll only get worse in a couple of weeks as we begin to see the after effects of people ignoring COVID protocols and gathering for large Thanksgiving dinners. But we're already, before that, at or beyond hospital capacity in certain states, with others drawing near to that threshold. And I was just sort of wondering, as I track it every day, so it's always fresh in mind, Donald Trump's extraordinary line of BS on October 8th. You remember, immediately upon his his release from the hospital after allegedly contracting coronavirus himself, and further allegedly having been treated with this monoclonal culture miracle cure from, what was it, Regeneron, that he said was responsible for shortening his, turning his health around entirely, that he was in bad shape and he was ready to go and be released from the hospital, he said, within hours, but the doctors forced him to stay again overnight, and so in one day, his fortunes were entirely reversed and he was ready to be released from the hospital, according to his telling of things. And then, of course, the extraordinary, the really serious and damaging, deep down despicable lying was that everyone in America, in the vulnerable population among seniors anyway, was going to immediately find that this miracle treatment was available to them for free, courtesy of the United States government and Donald Trump, of course. And your worries were over. I guess I'm just saying, I've been tracking that since then, and now we're at the point where we are something like, I don't even know what the numbers are offhand, but 55,000 or so people have died in the time since he promised everybody was going to get this miracle cure that was going to get him out of the hospital in one day. And I think we're in the neighborhood of several million. What's the numbers? I'll have to look up my own tweets. I've forgotten just offhand. Here we are. Oh, yes, right. So 6 million, over 6 million additional deaths since then. And as a matter of fact, I even have the numbers wrong. I noticed a typo in last night's version of it. It should be 55, I think, or maybe now 56,000 Americans have died, and 6,104,354 more tested positive since Trump promised that he would. You remember the wording of the promise, that he was immediately set to sign what he called an order. I'm sure he meant for people to think it was an executive order. One, it wasn't, and two, there was nothing to sign. He was referring, if we try and normalize his speech and come up with language that makes sense for what he was saying, we could postulate, I guess, that he was referring to an emergency use authorization for the Regeneron product that was ready to be initiated elsewhere in the federal government, but not by him and not requiring his signature. But at any rate, this was immediately supposed to be underway. And then, of course, he added additional language, going on to brag about how these things sometimes take weeks, months, years under other administrations. But he was going to turn it around in a matter of days, and it was awesome, and your wait is over. Well, 56,000 additional people are dead, and that's not so good. And 6 million more have become infected since he promised that this whole thing was basically over, and nothing has come through. But he has been golfing 10 times or whatever since then. So I find that pretty amazing. And I just thought, if the problem is that we're nearing or exceeding hospital capacity at this point, wouldn't it be a fantastic time to deliver on this 2-month-old promise? Now, this is, again, October 8th that he comes out with this video. And we're nearing, we're on December 1st. In a week, it'll be exactly 2 months to the day since he promised the medication for free, which really should have ended the fear of the coronavirus for America's seniors 2 months ago, but really has done absolutely nothing at all because, 1, it might not be real. 2, he's never going to deliver on the promise of distributing it. 3, he's certainly not going to find any way of making it available for free to anyone but his closest friends and family. They've managed to get the treatment and escape death by coronavirus in the hospital, but nobody else has. Although I understand that apparently there's some additional last-minute trials underway, which I don't know what the protocol is for an emergency use authorization, but I guess I thought that was maybe over with and they would be distributing this thing. Remember that it sounds like it's the same mechanism by which they're going to be distributing or claim to be distributing the various vaccines. Although it sounds a lot more like there's more chatter than just Trump making videos about the vaccines. It sounds like that's supposedly actually underway, which just leads me to question why would the same process have resulted in no news whatsoever and what appears to be absolutely no action whatsoever on distributing this miracle cure. If we have a problem with people lingering in hospitals too long, such that there's no room for new cases or other non-COVID treatments and admissions, then it seems to me like the perfect solution for something like this would be a free treatment that enables everybody who enters the hospital with a diagnosis of COVID-19 to be out of there in a day or possibly even hours would be the perfect solution, and we're hearing nothing about it. I just wanted to point that out. But now I want to continue with what Mark had to say. Unmentioned in Scott Atlas's note is how uninformed, wholly political actions helped drive the nation to a point where literally millions have become infected in the last month, create a third surge that makes everything which happened previous to the fall seem like a warm-up act. Also unmentioned is the pure fact that he was wholly and completely unqualified for this position, with neither the experience nor the knowledge to deal with any aspect of a pandemic. In fact, Scott Atlas is a prime example of a form of government few saw coming, trollocracy, which I guess people, it's obviously a term he's inventing here, but I would think closely related to the actual terminology of what was it, kakistocracy? I don't know how you would pronounce the thing. I never bothered to say it out loud, but yeah, government by the worst possible people, I suppose. I don't even know why they bothered to make a word for that, but I guess someone thought it was fun and clever. But in a trollocracy, he tells us, people are selected purely on their perceived ability to piss off the other side, with no regard to actual ability to govern or the resulting real-world damage. That Atlas racked up a fresh 100,000 dead, yes, 100,000 people additionally died under his very short term in office. As I understand it, the position to which he was named, and I also have somewhere tucked away in my in my Twitter mentions here, someone's explanation that it was Jared Kushner, once again, who paved the way for this tremendous mistake, the mistake being ushering Scott Atlas into the position as head of the coronavirus task force. But anyway, apparently the special authorization under which he was working was only valid for 130 days. And that time is up, and he's resigning / getting kicked out bodily from the position. I suppose if Trump wanted to, just like all the other people who overstayed their statutory authority, they could have kept him there. But even Donald Trump, I guess, isn't impressed enough with Scott Atlas to keep him. All right. So that Atlas racked up a fresh 100,000 dead and urged the nation toward a goal of herd immunity that at best would require millions of victims, and at worst is still yet to come here, was simply unattainable, will not be counted against him. After all, he really, really made people mad, and that's the only score that counts. For the GOP trollocracy, Newsmax, OANN, and talk radio serve the role of discovering and promoting troll talent. That is, elevating those perceived as most offensive to people who actually know something about the subject being trolled. In this anti-Darwinian proving ground for selecting the most repugnant nonsense, Atlas defeated all comers. He was the choice to stand at the White House podium and spout libertarian-tinged anti-science lies after Trump himself tired of the job. Atlas is still out there feeding not just anti-mask sentiment, but making statements about the harm, in quotes, harm caused by masks that wouldn't pass muster in a 6th grade science class. He's constantly contradicted both the CDC and FDA, as well as common sense, and he's been especially disdainful of the members of the task force, like Anthony Fauci, who actually have decades of experience and knowledge concerning communicable disease. Believe it or not, Scott Atlas actually wandered onto the White House stage just 4 months ago when his, quote, contrarian views, i.e. bullheaded ignorance, caused Trump to pick up from the right-wing media, pick him up, I guess, and plant him in front of the experts who were desperately trying to get to the White House to do something, anything. It was that which probably made Atlas the most attractive candidate to Trump, because his real argument was that Trump was already doing the only thing appropriate for a government facing a crisis, nothing. But Atlas actually did less than nothing, because his confusing and contradictory statements actually worked out far worse than plain old nothing. Trollocracy goes a step beyond simple idiocracy, because it deliberately selects for those most at odds with those most at odds with a reasonable position. And now Atlas is going to do what trolls do, run for the hills when it becomes clear that their arguments were all hot air. Or, plain enough language, they were all basically murder. Mike Musson has a comment on this. Don't sell Scott Atlas short. He says, very few people could enter Trump's White House and leave as the crappiest person. That's true. Ordinarily they still leave Trump behind, and even when he hasn't left, so he doesn't count as the worst person leaving. But yeah, I get what you mean. I guess we can also make the observation, as I guess I came right up to this level of the observation, but didn't actually jump over the threshold. But Rebecca Romans has done it for us. Trump's mouth looks like a cat's anus. And you don't have to ask how you know that, because cats run around showing everybody their anus. That's their thing. That's their favorite thing in life, apparently. It makes them very happy. And so everybody who has seen a cat leave a room anyway, I guess, has got experience with that. It's quite true. Plus, of course, anything that compares Trump's face or any part of it to an anus of any animal, I think, probably something I should welcome into our into the the descriptive panoply, I suppose. All right, I don't even know. My vocabulary is falling apart this morning. Okay, let's see. Just wanted to pick up on a couple other things. What else is tucked away in pocket? Oh, everything's out of order on my screen this morning, so difficult to find everything that I have set aside for you in the order I wanted to bring it to you. Let's see. We're about up against our first break, but lots to discuss, including perhaps some discussion of this ProPublica piece. Well, maybe the headline is enough, and it could take you out into the break to provide you with that one. States with few coronavirus restrictions are spreading the virus beyond their borders. I don't know if you were aware of this, but the virus either doesn't know or doesn't care about where the borders are in between states or countries. It goes where people bring it and where people eject it, I suppose, and has no fear of crossing state lines, unlike insurance salesmen, I guess, presumably, if you listen to Republicans complaining about their number one health care concern in the world, at least prior to this healthcare disaster created by their own president. Anyway, that shouldn't surprise you, of course, and it probably makes you think, as it made Garant's Frank Rutte also think, that this is basically working with the gun problem as a model, right? I mean, how many times have we been reminded that states with few gun restrictions spread the gun problem across borders? That's always been true, and those aren't even microscopic. You can absolutely see them crossing borders, and there are even laws against bringing them across borders for certain reasons, but I guess most of those don't get enforced. A lot of them have been erased along the way, but two of our major public health concerns apparently don't respect state borders, and, well, no surprise there. Anyway, I'm just glad that they're on the case. We'll be right back with much more right after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netflix Radio. Just trying to use the break to fix last night's erroneous tweet about the number of Americans who had died and contracted the virus since Trump promised his miracle cure to everybody. It went out without the 6 in 56,000, so it went out looking like it was 5,000 Americans have died, which would be bad enough, of course, but it is off by a factor of 10, so I figured I would take care of that. No, I don't know it's the most efficient use of time, but it is what I did. Let's see. And I found the Garant's Frank Rutte discussion, so I could share that tweet with you. Let's see. There's so many other directions we could take here. But shall we take a look? I don't know. Maybe it's probably... I'll just bring it to your attention, the fact that the ProPublica piece actually exists. Because, quite honestly, how could you not imagine that this was the case? But if you would like the details or to mine the piece at some point for any nuggets that wouldn't necessarily jump out to us as obvious, you are welcome to do so. I might want to take a look at it after the break, and maybe or after the show today. Maybe we'll end up deciding that it's something that needs to be shared. Maybe not, but at least I wanted to make you aware of it. You probably imagined that this was the case, and now there's a piece that you can share to make that point for you. How about this? Just in terms of a different direction. This I had no plans for whatsoever, but it seems like an interesting diversion and something that we ought to be aware of I guess as soon as possible. Something from Foreign Policy, which I don't even know how it came across my Twitter, virtual Twitter desk here. Pentagon says, and we all trust the Pentagon, right? I don't know. I guess at some point we have to. So there are still some professional people there. Pentagon says the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, MBZ's place, not MBS, MBZ, says that the UAE is funding Russia's shadowy mercenaries in Libya. Now, I don't stay very up to date on issues like this all the time. You should. It's important. It's just not my my wheelhouse, really. And so, but it does concern me when I see things like this. And what do we mean? Russia's shadowy mercenaries. And where? In Libya? I didn't even realize. But the article, it seems pretty succinct and will raise the issues clearly for those of you who aren't foreign policy experts. Those of you like me who aren't foreign policy experts, let's say. And worry you sufficiently, and I guess give you some idea of what might the Russians be scrambling to do while they can still take advantage of the idiot Donald Trump being president of the United States and having no idea how to respond, or being able maybe even to be bribed into responding as they wish. Subheader here: the Defense Department's Inspector General found that the United Arab Emirates is financing Russian Wagner Group mercenaries, just as Trump aims to sell the UAE billions of dollars worth of arms, which I suppose they won't be using in Libya because they're just paying for Russians to use their arms there. But I don't know. Have we ever mentioned the Russian Wagner Group? Not that I recall, although anything's possible. Sometimes I forget from moment to moment what we have mentioned on the show. But is there a Russian Blackwater? Essentially, I suppose it makes some sense. Somebody, somewhere, one of the oligarchs in Russia would have seen how much money Eric, Prince is making with Blackwater, or whatever he's renamed it at this point, and must have thought, we have out-of-work soldiers, we have military surplus, and we have an environment, a political environment in which the government would absolutely permit us to maintain private armies as long as it inured to their benefit at some level, and bribes would probably take care of that. We should do it. So I guess it was an inevitability. But anyway, this article here, written again in Foreign Policy by Amy McKinnon and Jack Detch, just published yesterday, so fairly recent. The United Arab Emirates is apparently helping to finance the Russian mercenary group Wagner, and I don't know whether they pronounce their W's as V's the way the Germans do, whether it's Wagner or not, but anyway, helping to finance this Russian mercenary group in Libya, according to a report issued last week by the Pentagon Inspector General for Counterterrorism Operations in Africa, a finding which is likely to complicate the United States' close relationship with the Gulf state. And I'm not quite used to that as a description of our relationship with Libya as being close, but I suppose post-Gaddafi, that might be a valid description of things. I know next to nothing about the situation in Libya these days, but I probably should. And I guess we're gonna, starting now. Experts have long suspected that the UAE may be using Russian private military contractors to help obfuscate its role in the conflict, but the report is the first public official assessment of the arrangement. Military officials have been increasingly candid in their assessments of the Wagner Group's destabilizing role in Libya, amid concerns that the Kremlin may use the conflict to establish a military foothold off of Europe's southern shores. Yes, that's right. That's where Libya is. In July, the Pentagon's Africa Command accused the group of indiscriminately laying landmines around Tripoli and putting the lives of civilians in jeopardy. And here we all thought we were getting away from the use of landmines, but they got to use up their military surplus somehow. And you can't blame us, Russia, that is, for doing that. because it's just a bunch of private actors. We got no control over that. No one exercises autocratic control in Russia. We don't do that. We're a free country, or something like that. But the revelation that those Russian mercenaries may have been bankrolled by one of America's closest military allies in the Middle East further complicates the calculus for Washington and comes as Democrats in Congress have been... Remember Democrats in Congress? It's a song about Democrats in Congress. It's not. But anyway, it comes as they have been mounting a campaign to oppose the Trump administration's proposed $23 billion sale of F-35 fighter jets to Abu Dhabi. Isn't this something that they've been working on for years and years? How come Mr. Great Deals Get It Done hasn't made the great deal and gotten it done? Because, it's all an act. But anyway, moving on again. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee is set to hold a closed hearing on the arms sale early Monday evening. That would have been, I guess, yesterday when this was published. Now there appears to be a permanent Russian presence on the flank of NATO. Who would want that, right? And it was enabled by a U.S. ally, said Frederick Wehry. I'm hopeful I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's not W-A-R-Y, it's W-E-H-R-E-Y. What do you think, Frederick Wehry? A senior fellow in the Middle East program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It doesn't sound very peaceful, what he's studying here, but he's hopeful. 9 countries have provided military support to the opposing factions in the Libyan conflict, and as many as 10,000 mercenaries from foreign fighters have battled in support of the warring parties. Seems like fun, right? Most notably, Turkey. Didn't even know about them in this. Turkey has supported the Tripoli-based United Nations-backed government, the Government of National Accord, which I guess counts as a good thing because United Nations-backed, and I guess we're all supposed to like that. While Russia has thrown its weight behind the renegade Libyan general Khalifa Haftar, who controls large swaths of territory in the country's east. And what could go wrong with Libyan military warlords, right? While private military contractors are outlawed within Russia, right? Oh, because they're a normal country joining the community of nations. A network of, I don't know. I guess they mean outlawed for working within Russia. But, we're no great shakes on that ourselves. Anyway, a network of companies collectively known as the Wagner Group has been at the forefront of Russian interference efforts abroad from Ukraine to Libya and Sudan. The Kremlin's increasing reliance on the group has lent its overseas operations a veneer of plausible deniability. But Wagner is deeply entwined with the Russian military and intelligence structures, and the Department of State has characterized it as a surrogate for the Russian Ministry of Defense. It's hard to imagine it being anything else in Russia's governmental structure. The group was initially thought... a big pop-up has gotten in the way here. Get lost. The group was initially thought to be bankrolled by Putin ally Yevgeny Prigozhin, although it has increasingly secured a number of contracts with foreign actors in Syria, Sudan, and the Central African Republic, further blurring the lines between Russian foreign policy and for-profit motives, which is a whole other subject entirely, and might very well be the general modus operandi of what passes for a Russian government anyway. The overall impression that I have had for a very long time is that Wagner is being completely funded by foreign contracts, said Kimberly Martin, a professor of political science at Barnard College. While the UAE has been the biggest military backer of Haftar as part of its broader effort to quash political Islam in the region, the Gulf states' role in the conflict has received significantly less scrutiny than Russia's intervention. And again, here I was confused briefly in reading this and saying the Gulf state. That would be UAE. I thought they were still talking about Libya here, which isn't on the Gulf. But again, while the UAE has been the biggest military backer of Haftar, as part of its broader effort to quash political Islam in the region, by which I guess they mean Shiite Islam and perhaps Iranian-directed Islam. The UAE's role in the conflict has received significantly less scrutiny than Russia's intervention. Experts attribute this to the UAE's formidable lobbying efforts in Washington and the country's role in other key U.S. foreign policy objectives, such as the maximum pressure campaign on Iran and the UAE's peace deal with Israel, which has been hailed as a rare foreign policy success for the Trump administration, even if it doesn't mean anything in particular. It doesn't gather a lot of traction because when you mention it to U.S. officials, they say, well, we have other equities with the UAE. Says Emaduddin Badi, a non-resident senior fellow at the Middle East program of the Atlantic Council. The UAE is Russia's closest ally in the Gulf, and I thought was supposed to be ours, but okay. And while experts have long harbored suspicions that the two countries were closely cooperating in Libya, the Emirates' reliance on Russian mercenaries on the ground has also enabled them to obfuscate their involvement. It's deniability. It's better than direct involvement, said Anna Borshchevskaya. That's not a bad attempt. A senior fellow at the Washington Institute. The cautious wording of the Inspector General's report that the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, has assessed that the UAE may provide some financing for the group's operations is likely a reflection of the political sensitivities involved. The Trump administration has long been reluctant to call out U.S. partners in the Gulf, including the UAE, despite allegations of human rights abuses in the conflict in Yemen, and Trump has gone as far as to say that the U.S. has no interests in Libya. My goodness. I would imagine DIA has some good information on the UAE's support to Wagner, said Douglas Wise, who served as Deputy Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency from 2014 to 2016. Having DIA issue this would be an easy and less formal and embarrassing way to chide the UAE on their behavior than a diplomatic note or a press release from DOD or the White House. It lets the UAE know that we know, he said, and that makes some sense. Throughout 2020, or what we call 2020, experts tracking the conflict in Libya have noted patterns that would indicate closer ties between the UAE and Russia. In January, after Turkey's parliament approved a measure to allow active duty troops to fight on the ground in Libya alongside Turkish-backed mercenaries, wow, they've got them too, there was a drastic increase in Russian and Emirati cargo planes, likely laden with weapons and ammunition, flying to eastern Libya and western Egypt. Like Russia, the UAE supports Haftar, the eastern Libyan strongman who was once, of course, a CIA asset, and for years lived in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. Boy, are we great. The increased Russian presence in Libya has also coincided with Emirati drawdowns, further sparking suspicions. As cargo shipments began to tick up and more Turkish troops entered the country, the UAE withdrew its equipment from the Al-Qadim air base near Benghazi and allowed Russian forces to take over the facility. But the likely turning point for the U.S. military that led to flagging the UAE was the deployment of a dozen Russian fourth-generation fighter jets operated by Wagner in May, which was part of Haftar's push to stop Turkish-backed forces from advancing further into the country, said Jalal Harchawi, a senior fellow at the Paris-based Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. We might want to make use of that group at some point. That moment incensed many within the Department of Defense, but the only facet that was made public back then was AFRICOM, Africa Command, naming and shaming the Russians publicly, he said. The other facet, of course, was that the Americans knew full well that part of the Wagner mission in Libya was likely paid for by Abu Dhabi. But while the U.S. election was still up for grabs, When the Pentagon first spotted Russian fighters in Libya, the Trump administration's departure makes it easier for the Pentagon to speak up now. Alluding to it in May was a much tougher proposition than now, Shadowy said. The United Nations panel of experts, that's like capitalized, I guess that's the thing, the panel of experts, how would you like to be on that? Which reports on possible sanctionable activities in conflict zones, has reported that the UAE repeatedly violated the world body's embargo on arms transfers into Libya. That seems pretty obvious. Now, we've known that there has been a battlefield coordination between the Emirates and Wagner, said Frederick Wary of Carnegie, but the funding is just one more indictment of the Emirates collaboration. So that's kind of alarming, don't you think? I think we are... I have another item of military interest, a piece submitted by our good friend Darwin, who, commenting on the now planned American withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, at least a drawdown, if not an entire withdrawal. But it runs just a minute or so longer than we have left in the segment, and maybe I can save it for the next segment instead. I think an important topic as well would have made a great follow-up to this, and if he were on live, I guess I could stop him as the break came up and just have him finish on the other side, but it's an awkward thing to do with a recorded piece. So, note to self, I want to play that later on, and I think it's important for a number of reasons, not the least of which is I'm not certain that we know exactly, I don't know that I know exactly how to react to this proposed drawdown of troops. On the one hand, good, bring troops home. That makes sense. The conflict in Afghanistan has gone on for 1 million years. That's a major point of the discussion of 2 articles on the subject that Darwin has recorded for us. But on the other hand, you worry that it sets up in classic style, like so many other previous traps where liberal-minded and left-leaning folks who would normally say, yes, one, we are reluctant to get ourselves involved in any military conflict if we can avoid it. And, 2, wary of being accused of being somehow soft on such military matters. It's not immediately obvious where the members of the military stand, and where military families and those who are military adjacent feel about something like this. They're very frequently, especially earlier on in a conflict, will be very resistant to calls to draw down or remove ourselves from the situation. Throw into that the complication that it's Donald Trump calling for this drawdown, but in an overly, it has always kind of been in an overly simplistic way. You have questions about the efficacy of the drawdown and whether it accomplishes the liberal-leaning desire to remove ourselves from the conflict without creating the situation that I think everybody fears of, creating a power vacuum into which our global rivals, and in particular Russia, could move to fill that vacuum, as they're doing, I guess, here in Libya, as they've been doing in Syria. It's just it feels like the right thing to do, but it also feels like the wrong person to be in charge of executing it, which is probably, they're both true, but ultimately it's either, well, do you roll the dice and do the thing you ought to be doing, even though the president overseeing it is not likely to pay close attention or be careful about it, and just rely on the professionals in the military structure to make sure it's done correctly and that he's advised properly and that people understand the tricks of the trade to getting this president to agree with and execute what might be a correct policy? Or do you wait? Are you close enough to say it's not a tremendous problem to wait for the drawdown to be executed under President Biden? Does the transition create additional delays that we don't know about, and of course, the combatants in Afghanistan don't care one way or the other which president makes the withdrawal, except insofar as it would be perhaps a political coup for them to deliver a decisive blow against American forces as soon as Biden comes into office and before he can organize the terms of a withdrawal under his watch. So it creates a huge problem, and as well, I'll let Darwin make his argument too. But you have, of course, the question of, the ordnance and weapons that would be used once launched by combatants against American forces. They too don't care about the fact that a new regime is coming. If they've been fired at American troops, they'll do their damage, whether it's December 1st or January 21st. They don't care. So keeping an eye on that. Let's see, what else can we squeeze in between? It won't make as much sense as far as our transition goes, but keep in mind that we're going to come back to this Darwin piece. That'll help us thread those things together. Let's see what else is in pocket here. Worth pointing out, some shorter items here. I thought maybe this could come up tomorrow when Greg returns, but in case it doesn't, or even if it does, we'll just discuss it more. Dave Wasserman, or Redistrict on Twitter, had this interesting observation on what looks like the first round of a declaration on who has won the congressional contest in Iowa's 2nd District. A very close race, extremely close race there between Republican, and her name is Marionette, like not Marionette the puppet, but very damn close. Marionette, like Marionette, Marannette, Annette, with Marie on the front. Marionette Miller Meeks. It's a lot of M's. Not the most that I've seen hung on a Congresswoman elect, but Marjorie Margolis Mezvinsky. I may even have her beat on that one. But Marionette Miller Meeks, apparent winner over Rita Hart, the Democratic candidate, by 6 votes, which is always astonishing. But as Dave Wasserman points out here, a couple of notes on reading those results. Of course, it's taken forever to get around to that, and more legal challenges may yet loom for this. When it's down to 6 votes, you can pretty much be assured that there'll be some additional legal maneuvering. But Iowa has now certified Marionette Miller Meeks as the winner over Rita Hart by those 6 votes, 196,964 to 196,958 in, again, Iowa's 2nd District. Hart, it says here, is plowing ahead with legal challenges. Apparently, Wasserman notes tongue-in-cheek here, when we said this would be a single-digit race, we really meant it this time. Of course, they're talking about polling, but this is the actual voting results. Now, here's something to keep in mind, because, people are, they're putting the worst possible spin on things, of course, and even as we said, wait and see how many Democrats, in fact, lose their races after all down ballot before you get too dejected about it. It seems like they are kind of falling. The last ones are appearing now to fall the Republican way. But this is what you should take in context. This was Miller Meeks's 4th run for this seat after 3 unsuccessful bids prior to this one. So, take it with a grain of salt here. This is her 4th attempt at running for the seat, and she appears, at least initially, to have won it, but by a grand total of 6 votes. She's not a hugely popular figure in this district, and I guess would instantly occupy the position of most vulnerable new member here. But there's more than just that. Not only are the 6 votes, is the 6 vote margin something to keep in mind, but and this will be a matter of, well, this will make you kick yourself, especially if you live in that district, or it might make you want to kick other people who live in the district. 19,189 voters in this contest left the race blank. They came to vote for president and or something else, and for whatever reason left the congressional race portion of the ballot empty. So 6 votes separate them. 19,189 people took the trouble to vote at least for president, but couldn't be bothered to figure out what to do for their congressional representation. 703 people voted for a write-in candidate, which, at least they paid attention to the congressional race. It's not, typically speaking, a smart thing to do, and I'm sure they thought it'll make no difference. But then, how many of them would take it back if they knew that there was a 6-vote margin? Probably lots, which is why, by the way, judges and everybody else are ordinarily not inclined to let races be done over again, except in the most extraordinary circumstances. And losing the race and thinking that maybe everybody would do it differently if they got a second chance is not a reason to have that happen. That's why that remedy is strongly discouraged. And lastly, 175 voters accidentally, and it says question mark, like maybe they didn't do it by accident, but it's certainly a mistake, accidentally voted for both. So, of course, it counted for neither. So 6 votes separate them, and 175 people just couldn't bring themselves to make a choice, nor could they bring themselves to leave the race blank or fill in a write-in candidate that just said, why don't we just vote for both and then everybody will be happy. So I don't know. Given that she has run 3 times prior and been rejected 3 times prior and now sneaks by under with just 6 votes in the majority here, I wonder whether, clearly it did make a difference, and they're not going to get who they probably really wanted in that district. Anyway, much more about the elections and Darwin's piece coming up after this break. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. There are a couple other short items, I think, that deserve some inclusion. But maybe the thing to do here, strategically speaking, is to roll into the other foreign policy, military policy piece. As promised, our good friend Darwin Darko brings us this recorded segment, including, his partial read of 2 articles on the subject and his own personal spin on it. Like I said, I think this serves a terrific purpose as to bring Greg into the discussion, a permission structure, particularly for those who have no military background or no military attachments. Permission structure for you to think of withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, even under the Trump administration, as an okay thing. Why? Because Darwin, himself with a military affiliation, says so. And really, shouldn't that be enough for you? But of course, he also says so, bringing backup with him. It's not just him, of course, saying so. One of the opinion pieces that he brings to us is from top, not necessarily Pentagon, but top military brass who have had experience on the ground in Afghanistan as well. Let's roll it.
Hello, everyone. Hi, David. I'm recording this a few days after Thanksgiving. Hopefully everyone stayed safe and did the best they could in the age of the pandemic. What I'm bringing to the forefront today is a discussion about Afghanistan. As you might have seen in the news recently, the president wants to pull all the troops out of Afghanistan. We've gotten down to some reduced numbers, but it's not a complete withdrawal as of yet. But my position personally, and has been for a while, is that it's time to go. It's time to get out of there. I think that if I was to propose to you, or to anyone, in upper brass at the beginning of this, and I'd say, okay, I have this, project we're going to work on called Afghanistan over here in the Middle East. And, I just want to get your approval before we get started. It's going to take me 100 years to accomplish. We're going to have our our military members there. They're going to be dying even in later years. They're going to be subject to attacks there, and we are also going to be killing civilians. And the budget is going to just keep increasing up until the time that we get to year 100. You would look at me and say, or the authorities would look at me and say, "Okay, you're crazy. Get out of here." Right? Wouldn't give me the time of day, and I say, "Okay, fine. I'll come back with a new proposal." And so I come back, and then I'd say, how about 50 years? I can do it in 50 years. We'll cut it down in half. I'll do 50 years. You say, no, that sounds bananas. Then we rinse and repeat the activity. And I get to the point where I would say, okay, how about 20 years? And even then, I would be laughed out the room as this is being ridiculous. You are trying to commit us to an activity, foreign activity, hostile region for 20 years. No, you're mad. We will not approve this. We will not fund this. And, it's a ridiculous idea. But turns out if we started off with jumping into an activity like this with blindfolders on, we'd end up at the 20-year mark as of next year. It's been 19 years we've been in Afghanistan. If we would have said from the very beginning that we would take us 19 years to do this, or the thought process when Bush got us into this was going to be, hey, it's going to take 19, 20 years for this thing to happen. No, there would be no approval in Congress. Even the Republicans wouldn't have approved it if that was laid out from the very, very start. But alas, here we are. So I have two opinion articles that I want to read from. I'm not going to read the full thing from each, but that pretty much these guys say it better than me and have, well written on the position on why we should be getting out of Afghanistan. The first one is from Business Insider. Actually, no, that's the second one. I'll start out with the first one here. It's from The Hill. Actually, it's time to leave Afghanistan, plainly titled. It begins. It took 6 months of jockeying, but the Afghan government and Taliban negotiators are finally making preparations for direct peace negotiations. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani's decision to call a Loya Jirga on the contentious issue of prisoner releases appears to have paid off. On August 8th, the Grand Assembly approved Kabul's request to release the final 400 Taliban prisoners from its custody. The result paved the way for formal talks between the two sides. The intra-Afghan negotiations represents the first time since the conflict began that Afghans will sit down and discuss their considerable differences together. But it's also an opportune time for Washington to do what it should have done years ago: extricate the U.S. military from the war. And this is what I like about this particular opinion piece. There's some statistics in here for us. So, approximately 8,000 U.S. troops remain in Afghanistan. Nearly 19 years after U.S. military operations against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban commenced, the American people have been asking themselves the same question throughout that long period. When will Americans in uniform finally pull out of a conflict that has lost its purpose? According to a March 2020 Economist and YouGov poll, 44% of Americans surveyed believe sending U.S. troops into Afghanistan was a mistake. In April 2020, a poll commissioned by the Concerned Veterans of America found 73% of veterans and 69% of military households support the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, a 13-point increase compared to the year prior. The Koch Foundation, the dreaded Koch Foundation, also found that nearly 3/4 of Americans support bringing U.S. troops home from both Iraq and Afghanistan. If the American people had their way, the U.S. military would have been out of Afghanistan years ago. The opinion piece goes on, but I'll end it there and jump on to the next one. This one was actually written in August, just this past August 2020. This other opinion piece is by Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. He's retired, but he wrote this back in February 2020, actually. So he titles it, "After Decades of Failure, the U.S. must get out of the war in Afghanistan before one more American is killed." That was one of the questions that also not one of the questions, but one of the things I was thinking about is, how do you ask that last person to die for this war? Somebody who died in August or July 2020 for a war that started in 2001. How do you ask that person to put their life on the line beforehand and follow through with it? Anyway, so he starts off, 2 more American troops were killed in Afghanistan over the weekend. So this again was back in February. The latest in a long line of insider attacks. According to official DoD statistics, we're up to 2,440 American deaths in Afghanistan now. It's painful to see American casualty numbers in Afghanistan rise while the White House refuses to acknowledge what has been clear for well over a decade. The war is unwinnable. And just yesterday, a report came out saying President Trump has given conditional approval for a peace deal with the Taliban that would result in withdrawing some forces from Afghanistan. Withdrawing American troops from Afghanistan is something to celebrate. However, our withdrawal should not be contingent on a signed agreement with the Taliban, as we can leave on our own terms, and we should. As I urged this week in a U.S. Senate hearing on the Afghanistan papers, the only rational course of action at this point is to wind down our military operations in Afghanistan and withdraw all combat troops. As I have been arguing for more than a decade, the United States has stubbornly pursued a military strategy contrary to overwhelming and consistent evidence that fundamentally could not succeed. We ignored entire categories of problems that we didn't want to acknowledge while continuing year after year to throw the bodies of young Americans into harm's way in hopes that flawed strategy would work anyway. Anthony Kordsman from the Center for Strategic and International Studies published an assessment of U.S. operations in 2015 entitled Afghanistan, a Year After Transition. Losing the war at every level. In it, he identifies the central problems causing failure. First, the United States has no declared strategy and shows no sign of trying to implement one, he wrote. It has slowly extended its military mission and seems to have increased its use of air power, but never evolved beyond merely conducting tactical actions. That mistake has never been corrected. President Trump entered office intent on shutting down endless wars, but barely 4 months into his administration was convinced by then National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster to simply increase the number of troops in Afghanistan. Regrettably, the increase in the number of troops did not come with a corresponding change in strategy. I'll skip down a little bit further down here, but it's all pretty much the same theme. But I really like the way he ends the article here very abruptly. Until the United States ends the war on our terms, in a professional manner, and at a pace of our choosing, this war will never end. American troops will continue to die. The Afghan government will persist in its corrupt ways, and we will continue pouring tens of billions annually into a seemingly bottomless failure. We should have acknowledged reality long ago and ended the war. The long history of U.S. failure in Afghanistan should not now prevent us from doing the right thing. End the war now and withdraw. So again, that was Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. He was a senior fellow. He's a senior fellow currently at the Defense Priorities. He used to be in the Army, retired in 2015, and after 21 years, included 4 combat deployments. So that's their opinion. I'm echoing the same sentiment. You have international relations thinkers and people that's been, boots on the ground here. It's okay. I know there's this whole trope about, Americans don't cut and run and all, but this is just, if anything, our stubbornness with this Afghan problem, reflects what's happening right now in this country, the war that we're fighting against COVID. And it's the same. We're just not gonna do what we know needs to be done. We know it needs to be done, but just our stubbornness is gonna prevent us from confronting the issue head on. The issue in Afghanistan, we need to withdraw. The issue with COVID, we need to shut down. We need to wear masks. We need to all hands on deck when it comes to distribution of the upcoming vaccines. But maybe if we were wasting less money on this bottomless pit of a occupation, that money could be, transferred over to the NIH or CDC. Maybe, towards employing people to work on this distribution problem that we're going to be faced with in a couple months for the vaccine. So, what do I know? That's just my opinion. I just wanted to share that with you folks, and hopefully we're getting out of Afghanistan. I know it could be a pipe dream to be completely out of there, but this conversation needs to continue, and it needs to, these voices that are anti the drumbeat of pointless and useless wars, those voices should be amplified, I think. So that's it for me today. Thanks for taking the time to provide this soapbox. Back to you, David.
Certainly, Darwin. Thanks for taking up the offer on the soapbox. So many things that I want to catch up on now. And, of course, I guess I probably should be spending my time checking on Joan to see whether she's available today or whether it's another one of those crazy days on the front page, or maybe one of those days where you tend to forget that, oh, yeah, it's Tuesday again. Let's see. I was searching around for word on this one, and I guess I must have misplaced it. And I guess at this point it was not, it just didn't strike me as, of any particular importance that I think it was, but I wanted to get the facts right on it. I think they said the 29th member of Congress to test positive in the last couple, well, I guess since the beginning of the pandemic, found himself testing positive. Another Republican member, and somebody, just generally speaking, unknown to me, a Republican backbencher. I don't know whether he happened to be resistant in any way to the science that might otherwise have prevented the spread of the virus to him or not, or whether he was just an unfortunate victim. But, well, let's see. I don't know if I'm going to come up with it here, but I'll search around. I thought it would be easier to find on Twitter, but so far no luck. But that's a remarkable number for 29 of them to have come down with it so far, and I guess I'm sure he'll be far from the last. Let's see. Other items of some interest that I'd like to cover beforehand. Look, and here's a note. Joan's already up and monitoring things. I'll be there. I know I hate to make it sound like she's, always questionable, but it's a tough thing to be doing. And it's earlier in the morning for her. And, work for a news site, right? So you work for a news site. You're going to be on call at all hours and any day. The call could come. Hey, Trump could finally fall down the stairs, and she might be lucky enough to get assigned that job. I don't know if she would consider that to be lucky at all, but anyway, let's see. Other items that I had to cover. So many directions to go in. Also in the COVID news, I guess a little bit more to the point in terms of general interest in it. The Pennsylvania state senator who has got a lot of track record on this. One was apparently the organizer of his state's anti-lockdown rallies in Pennsylvania. You'll never guess, he's got coronavirus. And what I think made it even more remarkable was that this was also the guy who was behind the organization, and this won't surprise you, organizing that weird field hearing in Gettysburg at the hotel the other day, where they had Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis come in and not testify, but spew garbage about the what they call the rigging of the election in Pennsylvania, and they were going to this and that and the other thing. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, nowhere in any of these contested states, I don't think, has the judicial system shut down their stupid claims quite as strikingly as in Pennsylvania. Maybe there are a couple of close seconds out there. But anyway, he organized this thing as well. And then they followed it up by saying, let's have you come down to the White House and meet with the president. This, of course, because, the events of the day, you may recall, the president announced out of the blue without checking with anybody, who was responsible for coordinating such things, announced, I'm going to go to Gettysburg and I'm going to speak at this thing, which I think everybody in the White House thought there's nothing there but the potential to embarrass yourself. Let the crazy conspiracy theorizing be done by Giuliani and Ellis. They're willing to do it for whatever reason. Let them do it, and you stay out of it. And I think they came up with the excuse of, well, the president isn't going to go because someone on Rudy Giuliani's team has been exposed to COVID, which is hilarious in its own right. And so therefore, it would be dangerous for you to go and hang out with them. They came up with that excuse the day before or so when the White House team, the Trump legal team was, the elite strike force was on hand in the building, presumably to help on strategy, the day the contingent from the Michigan state legislature showed up and allegedly showed up to tell them, no, we're not doing what you want. But I have my doubts about exactly how that went down. But anyway, they were there, and they made a point of saying in the news that the legal team didn't attend the meeting between the Michigan state legislators and Trump, which struck me as a sort of a Tom Hagen move, something like I'm ducking this meeting not because, the excuse that was given was they have been exposed to COVID, and that it would be therefore, I guess, dangerous to the state legislators to have them in the room with the contaminated legal team. But I think what they were really after was not contaminating the legal team with knowledge of what got discussed between Trump and the legislators, because Trump's request to the legislators was going to be an illegal act. And whether the legislators agree to do it or not, it's problematic if your lawyers are in the room when that gets done, because you can compel them to testify about that later. So instead, they actually thought it would be less embarrassing public relations wise to say they all had COVID and couldn't go. Anyway, that then carries over, because, you can't just say, well, we can't be in the room with you because we have COVID today, but tomorrow or 3 days from now, we no longer have COVID. So therefore, it's now safe for us to be in these meetings, because people don't forget that stuff. But since they're lying, they just figure go ahead with it. And sure enough, right. So they had too much COVID to meet with the Michigan state legislators, but they had, I don't know, but they had the same COVID a couple days later when they went to Gettysburg nonetheless. Now, maybe they weren't lying, because at Gettysburg, they sat down and did this whole spiel. And then the guy who organized it for the Pennsylvania State Senate came away COVID positive. But that's not the end of the story. Neither is it the end of the story at that point to say, by the way, Trump, though he was convinced or prevented somehow by White House staff from making an idiot of himself by going to Gettysburg, he instead made an idiot of himself by calling Jenna Ellis's cell phone and saying, put me on speaker, and then hold me up to the microphone, I want to talk. So he did, in fact, testify at this stupid hearing, but he's so lazy, he wouldn't even get in a golf cart to drive to Marine One to take the helicopter to Gettysburg to do the work. He did it. He literally phoned it in, and Jenna Ellis played it on speakerphone. And I was wondering, I thought it would be funny. I didn't know how long he went on in that, but I thought if anybody has Jenna Ellis's phone number, now would be the time to call it, and call it repeatedly. As Trump is, pouring his shriveled heart out over speakerphone into the microphone to call her and have the call waiting beeps come through instead of his stupid speech would have been hilarious. But in fact, somebody, I guess, did think of that, but maybe they weren't as malicious as I was, because I guess they only did it once, but it seemed like a pretty funny situation. The phone connection thing has been kind of a funny thing over the last couple of days. I'll just throw in this other piece here. Yes, and I'll have to make a note to myself to grab the tweet that I saw that referred to it. But yesterday, while the governor of Arizona, is that Doug Ducey, was signing the paperwork to certify Arizona's vote, and I guess sink Trump's prospects of contesting the vote anyway in Arizona courts. While he was signing the paperwork, apparently the story goes like this. He too got a phone call on his cell phone, which was in his coat pocket. Unless you were listening very closely and had the sound all the way turned up, you couldn't tell exactly what happened. He just reaches in, takes the phone, turns it off. He's clearly gotten a call that's annoying to him. Turns it off and sets it on the desk and continues signing the papers. But if you turn the sound up all the way, according to the tweet anyway, the sound that you're hearing, you can verify this for yourself if you have your volume all the way up. The ringtone is "Hail to the Chief," which, ordinarily indicates the president, although sometimes I guess you could say there are governors out there who think of themselves as potential presidents, and if they're thinking of running for president, they might do something dumb like change their own ringtone to Hail to the Chief. But apparently the story goes, I guess too embarrassed to live with that story. At some point, Ducey, I guess prior to this, had told local press that, yes, he had in fact set the ringtone on his phone to Hail to the Chief when he's being called by Trump or the White House, so that he doesn't miss an important call from them. And I guess because this president tends to do his calls that way personally on a cell phone to cell phone, I guess it makes a difference. So he set this ringtone to Hail to the Chief, which means that while he was certifying the vote against Trump and perhaps doing it on C-SPAN and with Trump's knowledge, the question is, was Trump watching on television and saw that he was sitting down to sign the certifications for the electoral vote in Arizona and thought, if I call him, I can talk him out of it, even though he's already signed the first couple papers and is in the middle of doing it now on live television. I am going to stop him with my fantastic deal-making skills. And if that was the case, it's only funnier than that Ducey just simply, checks the phone, takes the phone out, realizes immediately who's calling, turns it off, mutes it, and sets it aside to go about finishing up the paperwork. Anyway, funny stories there. Oh, yes, and there's one more great detail about the idiot state senator who organized both the anti-lockdown protests in Pennsylvania and this Gettysburg hearing. So if there's any truth to the rumor that the elite strike force had enough COVID circulating among it that it was too dangerous to meet with the state legislators from Michigan, then they ought not to have been among the state legislators from Pennsylvania. But I have my doubts about that story for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that, like I said, right after that hearing, they get on a helicopter and fly down to Washington to meet with the president at the White House, at which point they are subject to the usual routine of rapid COVID testing that everybody gets before you sit down with the president. And I just thought that the chef kiss on the whole thing was that apparently they test everybody, and during the meeting with the president, this Pennsylvania state legislator, state senator, what's the name here, Doug Mastriano, finds out the results of his test, which are, of course, you have COVID right now, and you're sitting in a meeting with the president of the United States. But don't worry, because the president's totally immune and can go and kiss everybody in the audience at his rallies, etc., even though a couple days later they said that he couldn't meet with the legal team and the legislators from Michigan because COVID. He was not immune that day, you see, but he was immune a couple days later. But anyway, yeah, I just thought the chef kiss to the whole thing is that you get the rapid test before you meet with the president, and they didn't even bother to wait for the rapid test results to come in before they usher him in to sit with the president. I think if you give people the rapid test, you wait whatever it is, 15 minutes, even if it's 45 minutes, show up early, get your test, and then when it's negative, go in. But they don't even wait for that. You just walk right in, and then in the middle of the meeting, you leave now. You have COVID. I thought that was fantastic. I bet you did too, Joan. Joan McCarter is here with us now. Good morning. I know we're almost on our way to the break, but you want to...
It was fantastic. For some reason, he had his kid with him too.
Is that right? Oh yes,
Pennsylvania
that's right.
State Senator.
Yeah, that was wacky too. And his kid and his kid's friend. Yeah, right. And what? I don't know.
These people.
I don't know. That is very weird. I assume that they didn't get it from the elite strike force legal team because that seems awfully fast. But, the point is he's been out there organizing anti-lockdown. Who knows? There was a great Onion headline the other day of Rudy Giuliani testing positive for several bat diseases not related to COVID. He's got problems, Rudy Giuliani.
Did you see that the elite strike force struck again in Michigan with a bad county, a wrong county.
Oh, yeah, so county that
After their
doesn't
whole
exist.
thing and where they screwed up Michigan and Minnesota,
Yeah.
they did it again.
They're really good.
So they've got one witness. At least Sidney Powell does, and I don't know. I don't think she's elite strike force anymore.
Oh, no, she's out.
But it's hard to tell. Whether she's freelancing or what. But anyway, she has another witness talking about something fishy in Edison County, Michigan. And Edison Township is in Minnesota.
So
these people.
Wow. Well, yeah, so that doesn't even exist in Michigan. Lots of mistakes like this. I had somebody straighten out the Pennsylvania discrepancy between a number of ballots requested and a number returned. Easy fix. I don't know. We'll be right back with more idiocy after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is with us. It was a raucous start to things here. So, okay, I think we got the people who got COVID in the last couple of days, for whom it is ironic stuff, out of the way, except I don't remember the name of the latest Republican congressman to test positive, but it was...
Three of them in Georgia.
Oh, wow.
Yesterday.
Yes, okay.
All Republicans.
I did see that there was one, and so there's more. Okay, so...
Yeah, there were three Republicans yesterday, all from Georgia.
Yeah,
so,
were they all together somewhere? All right, Georgia, look out. Probably something you should be doing about that. But I don't know. What a complicated state now with Trump at war with previous BFF Brian Kemp, and of course the Secretary of State did war with all the Republicans down there, and I still don't know exactly where the two Republican senators stand with respect to, I guess they're still calling for Raffensperger's head. Are they fighting with Kemp or no? Do you know?
Trump is fighting with Kemp. I don't know if anybody else is fighting with Kemp, but Trump is.
Yeah.
But, if Trump is, then they probably are too. I saw a tweet earlier today that was just so rich. There's actually a billboard up by, and I don't know if it's a Democrat who put this up or a Republican group for real. Let me retweet this for you.
Yeah, let's take a look.
A billboard saying Purdue Loeffler didn't deliver for Trump. Don't deliver for them. Huge red billboard paid for by Really American PAC. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. www.reallyamerican.com. So I
couldn't tell you for sure who would that be. I don't know. I mean, yeah. I'd pay for
Trump red. It's MAGA red.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a dumb PAC name, so maybe it's Republican, but I'd pay for that billboard. I mean, that's great mischief making. How odd. All right. Well, there's no telling exactly. And I did see people pointing out, I'm curious about where Kelly Loeffler falls on this. I mean, she's all in for Trump for sure, but she owes her appointment to the Senate to Brian Kemp, who defied Trump the first time in naming her. I think he wanted Collins.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they are and what. Maybe it just doesn't matter. I mean, Kelly Loeffler is probably like, she could divide her soul into Horcruxes very easily, I would think.
I think that she would have no problem with that.
I love you both. Okay. Well, all right. I'm going to mark that one and share that tweet with all the podcast listeners later on. And look at that. hard to know who that PAC would be. Maybe we'll find out one day, or maybe it'll just stay dark money forever, and we'll all just we can claim responsibility for it.
I know that it's incredibly dangerous to the Republic for Trump to be out there doing this, to be undermining the election, to be sowing this discord, to be getting people all riled up.
Certainly bad news.
But if he can keep doing it in Georgia until January 5th,
yeah, right. At that point, we would have you stop, please. But yeah, it would be great if he ended up screwing that up. I mean, and not beyond the realm of possibility. Of course, he screwed up mail-in voting programs for Republicans and lost the election for himself in so doing. So not impossible for him to screw this up as well. And, he's not a loyal enough Republican to care that it will hurt the Republican Party, of course. So you wouldn't believe it with anybody else, but with Trump, it's easy to see.
He's making a lot of money off of it. So, he's definitely going to keep up. I think I saw a New York Times story. Well, here's a Washington Post. He's raised more than $150 million for his legal battles. Three-quarters of which are going into whatever he's planning for 2024, if he's planning for 2024. Maybe he's just going to pay off the $400 million in debt he owes.
Oh, he can do that.
It's making him a security risk to the United States.
He needs more money than that. $150 million won't cover it, but I guess it would help. I understand that. Yeah, the small type on the solicitations that he sends out help us fight, to save American democracy. And people think that they're funding court battles and whatnot. And the small type says that, 75% of it goes to what turns out to be he's formed a leadership PAC, which isn't necessarily ordinarily something we see. I guess maybe presidents should be doing it. So maybe it's a surprise that they haven't been if that's the case. But, the reminder here is that funds in a leadership PAC can and frequently are legally used for funding personal expenses and lifestyle expenses. The idea being, you'll remember that Rick Santorum very famously was caught in it just because of how petty it was, buying himself coffee at Starbucks and lunch at Chick-fil-A with his leadership PAC money, but hundreds and hundreds of times. Such that many thousands of dollars were eaten up that way. But the theory is, if you're traveling to do political work on behalf of others or even for behalf of yourself, sure, your leadership PAC can cover that expense. So for Trump, that will be, I played golf with Lindsey Graham, so to the extent that I need to pay now, it used to be taxpayer money renting golf carts at my club and paying me. I will now use small dollar donations to pay myself renting golf carts, but in addition, just finance my regular stupid lifestyle this way. So most of the people donating to fund the legal fight, you're picking up the tab for the supposed billionaire, but no, there's no fixing your stupid now. It's not going to happen on this show. Anyway, good point. We don't know what he's going to do with this. And he'll probably, rather than pay off his debts, he'll probably just keep it and then attempt to work something out in bankruptcy over his debts. And then I guess Putin throws him out a window in Kyiv is what usually ends these debts. But
that could happen.
I'm just, I would say stay out of Ukraine if you can, sir. Tears streaming down my eyes. But
speaking of which, Putin. Lots of former intelligence officers and officials and agents are saying, Biden, we can end the tradition of former presidents getting intelligence briefings now.
That's a thought.
And it would be a really good idea.
How do we do
this
that?
One.
Yes, it would be a terrible idea to continue to provide him with real intelligence. Mm-hmm. Though it's the only source of it that he's going to get is the only intelligent thing you've said so far is leaking the intelligence we gave you. But wow. Okay. Yeah. What does it take to do that? Do you know? What's the mechanism?
Basically, Biden just says, well, would he pass a security clearance? If he doesn't pass a security clearance, he doesn't need to be getting these classified briefings.
So like just normal, regular reasons that would have been suspended during the Trump administration. Okay. Phew.
And, if
Perfect.
he can get any embedded, burrowed Trump person out of intelligence, then it'd be easy to achieve, apparently.
All right.
But it's going to be the burrowing that we have to worry about, and not just there.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this for a long time, it seems like, all the way back to Bush Co. And
yeah. Well, they were very
flurry
good
of fire sales and burrowing and horrible executive orders that Bush put in.
Right.
Trump's making them look like a piker.
Yeah, well, they've been working on it and kind of refining their practice for a while. As you mentioned, Bush really raised it to a dangerous level, but to an art form. And certainly prior administrations have, exercised that ability, but they really made a practice in the Bush administration of moving people from political appointee jobs that had no business in the civil service and embedding them there, as opposed to people who say, well, I'd like to continue the mission of, serving this department versus I'd like to continue the mission of dismantling this department from inside. So, yeah. All right. Well, they certainly should be looking out for them and making lists, but I love this idea of, that they can finally cut him off from intelligence briefings. I don't really know what they've been telling him all along, but.
And how, enough that he has stuff that he spills constantly.
Yes, that's the real problem. And it's not like he's doing anything. And, of course, the idea, as I recall, the idea of allowing presidents to continue to get those briefings is that a current president might very well want to call on the expertise of former presidents to discuss these issues. And what do you think we ought to do?
Diplomatic relationships they have, look at Jimmy Carter, how useful he's been.
Yes.
Over the decades.
Whereas
Trump is not going to be useful except for with,
right.
spilling stuff to Putin.
His shelf life expires. It's no help whatsoever.
And his personal debt is a huge concern, a huge security risk.
Yeah. And he would just absolutely sell that.
Oh, in a heartbeat.
Yeah, he doesn't care. He might not even be living in the United States when he does it at that point.
Yeah.
So it's a security risk to the United States. Who cares? I live in Abu Dhabi or Kiev or Moscow or who knows where. Pyongyang,
so Biden's
I guess.
going to have a very, very, very busy first few days.
Yeah. Wow. So another good. Oh yeah, here's your all right. Another a day one job for Biden, as you put it. Yeah. So one of many, but I think that's a good, pretty easy, quick one. Just say
that
give
one
them
will
a
be
background
easy.
check. The end, and it won't endanger any other former presidents. Give them a background check. Oh look, they passed. He didn't. So great, easy. You can always still call on President Obama if necessary, or President Bush if you think that'll help. I mean. I'd say
He could
no.
put down his paintbrush for a little while.
Right. If you're trying to get out of Afghanistan, let's say. Do you remember the name of the guy you used to call about the Afghanistan thing? Yes, I do. Okay. All right, good. Thanks. That's all.
That would work.
Yeah, right. Thank you, George. Have a candy. And
So,
what else is
the really
new?
big thing, of course,
Yes.
that Biden has to deal with is coronavirus and stimulus. And we really just don't know where that's going to be. But we have another bipartisan gang on the job, which is they're just stupid what Democrats are offering in this. And I hope it goes nowhere.
What's wrong? Everything.
Very angry about this.
That's fine.
because of course these brilliant Democrats, including Chris Coons, who are negotiating, they think, oh well, if we just cut everything in half and give Republicans half of what they want, then we'll all be okay. So they are talking $300 a week in enhanced unemployment insurance, which is, yes, better than nothing, but certainly not the $600 a week. They want to pour another $300 billion into the PPP, which is already proven ineffective, not the best use of money, not send any stimulus checks, which is the really stupid thing. Because people need money.
Yeah, that's the way to get it to them. I mean, you send it to the employer, they may or may not pass it on. Like, mostly not.
And give McConnell, this is quite possible, this is nearly as bad as no stimulus checks, giving McConnell a temporary liability shield.
Oh, yeah,
when
really
we are
that.
In the middle of the worst surge of cases, a surge upon a surge, as Fauci is warning.
Yeah.
Giving employers free rein to kill their employees.
Yeah. Well, why be careful if you're not going to be held responsible? You know, I mean, presumably, well, I don't want people to have coronavirus. Should be enough, but it isn't. Hasn't been so far. But in addition, you won't be held responsible.
We saw the Tyson pork plant in Iowa where managers and supervisors were taking bets on who was going to get sick and how many were going to get sick.
That ought to keep them out of the meatpacking Hall of Fame, I think, like Pete Rose, quite honestly. But that unbelievable. I mean, first of all, I don't know how you do that, just generally speaking. But second of all, by the way, terrible bet. I mean, not just a bad subject, but why would you bet with the guy who can control that?
Right. Who can expose the maximum number of people.
Right. But okay, so they're not good gamblers, certainly. But still, this is the self-regulating industries. They'll do the right thing by their employees because they don't want to lose, productivity. Apparently, they don't give a crap. What do you know? We'll just get new people.
Be, meatpacking jobs. There are a lot of poor people who desperately need these jobs. There'll always be somebody who will step in and take it. So,
all right. Well, it'll eventually fall
workers are disposable to them.
I guess so. And so many of them are immigrant workers. I suppose they get an extra kick out of that. But meanwhile, the Dakotas are on fire with coronavirus, and that's part of the reason there. And a lot of the majority of the Plains states, where a lot of those meatpacking plants are, they're not leaving the state once they get coronavirus. They're staying there and giving it to you, even if you don't work in a meatpacking plant.
Yeah.
But, science. No, they're not, because it's a hoax. So, all right, that's bad news.
So, I'm still kind of wound up about stimulus, and I'm still very wound up about Chris Coons and Joe Manchin and whoever else we've got on this bipartisan gang.
Yeah, well,
Manchin, Romney, Collins, the usual suspects.
Yeah, okay. Well, no surprises there, I suppose, in terms of who's on the gang. Just the fact that there are still gangs is a little dumb, but it could be the golden age of the gang if we're 50-50 in the Senate. I mean, I guess
would be very different.
Yeah.
So, 50-50 Senate. This makes getting those 2 Georgia seats so much more important.
Yes.
And one of the things that the House could be doing to help with that is by saying, look, here, we get these 2 senators, we get a unified Democratic government, we can pass real stimulus. We can do a lot. So, if I were the House, I would be saying, look, this is what we need to do. Get that $2,000 to every single person. Raise it from $1,200 to $2,000. I mean, at this point.
Yes.
Look at the stuff that is really going to help people immediately, and that's that stimulus check. That's that enhanced unemployment. That's extending the eviction moratorium.
Yeah, I don't
All
know
of these things that are going to be ending at the end of December need to be extended.
Yeah. If provided we get to the end of December, because we still have
provided we get there without half the nation dying.
Yeah, and the government shutting down in the middle of it, which we still have looming.
That's still out there, because we really don't know what Trump's thinking. We don't know that Trump's gonna. They're still talking about doing the omnibus bill rather than a continuing resolution. So,
okay,
they're putting together something big. I guess. They are not tying COVID relief to it, which I'm of two minds on. You have your must-pass spending resolution to keep the government open. It might be a good idea to attach something else to it that will help people.
Yes. Especially if, is this the same vehicle that Trump is threatening to veto once again over renaming military bases, or is that a separate vehicle?
It's the same.
Okay. So, I mean, if he's already if he's going to issue veto threats against the legislation that will keep the government open, yeah, it seems to me like you should then hang COVID relief on it and say not only is he closing the government to protect dead Confederate generals' honor, I guess, and if they had any, which is a separate question, but he's also killing coronavirus relief by doing this. It seems to me like that would make a better bet, especially if you could then, come back and take a second bite at the apple.
Yeah, and it puts more pressure on McConnell.
Yeah.
And, could help us get 2 Georgia Senate seats, which Trump is helping us get anyway.
Gosh, that seems like a bunch of good things that could happen. So, yeah, all right. Well, we'll see how they strategize their way through that one. We do pick up, tomorrow, I guess Wednesday, Mark Kelly gets sworn in as senator from Arizona, and we're rid of Martha McSally, so that's nice. She already left town, so that's fine.
There are other things happening that are horrible because they are. McConnell's going to bring up an FCC commissioner who is not good. And we're looking at the possibility that Pai is going to leave on January 20th. Senate's voting tomorrow on a very bad FCC commissioner, Symington, who is going to fight net neutrality and everything good to help people in the coronavirus crisis, extend broadband. What people are saying could happen is we have any Pai nominee blocked by McConnell's Senate. A Pai replacement, rather.
Okay.
So we're deadlocked 2-2 with this one really horrible guy, and the FCC doesn't do anything.
Yeah, all right. Well, that sounds like something they would say.
If you have the ability to start calling your Republican senators and saying, vote against this FCC guy, particularly if you're in Maine or Alaska or someplace, Utah, where maybe we have a gang member who would want to block Trump. Nebraska.
Maybe. Sure. Yeah. All right. So
there's another one.
Symington.
Tell them to vote against this FCC nominee.
It's Symington. Is that the name you gave us?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the Arizona Symingtons? Or is it just another bunch?
I am not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a lawyer who literally helped write the Trump administration's proposal to blow up Section 230 and censor the internet.
Okay.
This would be bad. Would be bad.
Different spelling of Symington. I think the Arizona ones are S-Y-M.
This is S-I.
Yeah. Okay. So either that or like Rona Romney McDaniel, he's embarrassed. We'll find out. I don't think there's any relationship. Okay. Nathan Symington. I'm looking him up. I didn't know anything about him. Or this nomination.
Until this morning because, they've been just dropping these things in, plotting this stuff.
Okay. Well, good to know. A good heads up. We should appreciate that. Give your senators a call. The nominations and the new Biden administration. I don't know what to do. Unless we get these 2 Senate seats, I just foresee. Well, everybody foresees a lot of problems. Even with the 2 Senate seats, quite honestly, it's pretty close.
50-50 when you've got Manchin in the mix.
Yeah, Manchin plus coronavirus that could take anybody out for any length of time at any moment.
Yeah.
Don't know how that happens. Manchin continue. I guess his favorite thing, the way he gets in the news, is to say, "I'm still against changing the filibuster rules." No one's asking, but
Yeah.
he's still against it. In case you want to print that, so
Yeah. Or packing the courts, or doing anything
Right.
really to.
because he's a fair guy.
Because he's a fair guy. Both sides, don't you know?
Yeah. Well, we'll see whether that changes if the 49th and 50th seats come in, if we can win in Georgia. I know he says that won't change anything, but I could see the Republicans essentially forcing his hand and maybe wanting to. We want to make him out to be a liar and a hypocrite. We can get him to change. It's kind of a Pyrrhic victory because they would then lose the ability to filibuster anything. But I'm wondering if the 50-50 Senate comes in and they now have to go and organize their committees. I don't know. If I'm McConnell, why don't I say our demand is that we get a majority on all the committees and that Republicans chair all the committees, even though it's 50-50, because screw you, that's what I want. And if you don't, I'll filibuster the organizing resolution and none of your committees can work. And then
It could happen.
And then what? And then you say to Manchin, your committee can't do any work. No committee can do any work unless you change your mind about breaking this filibuster. At least here on this.
But it would be very concerning to Susan Collins.
Oh, yes, right. Oh, I'm against this. I'm deeply troubled. Because I don't know why. I don't know. I'm not going to do any work on any of these committees, but somehow that's my line. I'm deeply troubled. It's worked for 50 years or whatever the hell she's been there for, so why not?
I'm still bitter on that one. I still am not over that one.
I don't see how it would be a very long time coming. You worked very long and very hard, and you were entirely right. And I don't know. People in Maine said, well,
What
she
the
said
hell,
she's
man?
sorry.
What the hell? I mean, Bill, I love you, but your
He didn't
people.
do it, I'm sure. Right. It's not him. It's not the squirrels. I don't know what happened. But, like we read earlier this morning, the Iowa 2nd District contest separated by 6 votes. What the hell with the thousands of people who left it blank? Why did you do that? If 7 of you had said, maybe this idiot who's run 4 times and never won in this district sucks, and the other one, I don't know, they may suck too, but we don't know yet. That would have been a fine basis for voting. But my neighbors have rejected this other person 3 times. She's back for a 4th walloping. I think I'll just check the other box. But nope. I
Voters, we need you. Damn.
Yeah. Do the work. All right.
Do the work.
What
We
else?
also need civics education. I've talked about
Yes.
this before. We really need
Sure.
much better civics education in the United States.
Yeah, that would help a great deal. Don't leave this race blank because Congress is an important thing. You should care about that. That would work. Or it matters if they're lying. You should check into that.
Yeah.
Or, if they tell you masks don't work or something dumb like that, would be a very specific example of it. But, we could have done a lot better. That's for certain. All right. Sad news that we haven't. Anything else spring immediately to mind? And last second things to watch or things that you're waiting for others to write?
There's going to be big focus, of course, and there will be through the rest of the month at Daily Kos on the Georgia Senate seats. It can't be overemphasized how important they are.
Yeah. It's so worrying that can we really keep up the momentum? I feel bad putting all this on the Georgia voters, carrying the weight of the presidential election and then to turn around and do this again. But, there is breathing room. So take a deep breath and get yourself and your neighbors out there and look for people who just turned 18 and couldn't vote in the presidential election and are waiting for their
There's
chance.
something like 18,000 of them or something. There's going to be a lot.
So we should have had a scavenger hunt for them. That's what we should have sponsored. Find one and you get a prize. Get them registered and get 2 prizes. And the prize is you win the Senate seat. So, all right. Well, fingers crossed for that. Next Tuesday will be the 8th with the shutdown.
And we'll be 7 days closer to a government shutdown.
Yeah, being the shutdown date being the 11th, as I recall. You corrected me
And
with that
the
one.
electors. And
yes.
that's what's looking.
All of that fun stuff. The safe harbor date comes and goes.
That's the 8th, I think.
Excellent. And then the Trump administration will pretend they don't know what that means. And I don't know. We'll see. Maybe by next week, this whole protest thing will be down to a joke, and Trump will just be raising money off of not holding any more hearings. Rudy Giuliani will find a more water-stable hair dye.
They weren't hearings, by the way.
Oh, yeah, right. The fake thingies that they were holding at the hotels.
Because
all right.
apparently there weren't any landscaping parking lots available.
All right. Thanks, Joan. We'll catch up with you in a week. Thanks for coming by today. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, Justice Putnam is up next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, one thing I meant to bring up, and I don't hope they're not voting today. Maybe they'll do it tomorrow. Elections in the Democratic caucus for chairman of the Appropriations Committee. This one's going to be real complicated. A three-way race, and you won't like the answer that the money formulation gives you. I'll tell you tomorrow.